When is a movie based on a book way better than the book? Wouldn't you agree?
No, what are you talking about? That's crazy talk.
The Little Prince. What's up, everybody? I'm Jake.
I'm Paul.
Welcome to the official Plugged In Vodcast.
Yes.
Silence, because everyone's in awe of us, Paul,
gold.
Of course.
I always think you're going to say something right after that.
All right, so we are talking about The Little Prince.
That's right.
Which is a little
Prince.
flick released on a little streaming network called Netflix.
Yes. Yeah, and the odd thing about The Little Prince, the movie, is that it's not actually very much about The Little Prince at all.
But it's actually like the perfect amount of Little Prince, if you ask me.
No.
Paul disagrees. Why is that, Paul?
Well, because...
What's the book about?
Here's the thing. The Little Prince is one of my very, very favorite books. And I was an English major. I've read, lots of books.
Super nerd, that's for sure.
This is one of my favorites. And one of the things about the movie... let's just launch right into the movie. I think...
Let's hit it. That's why you're here, right?
was a good movie. But for me, it was interesting that it didn't really deal very much with The Little Prince. I was expecting a lot more Little Prince in The Little Prince. Call me crazy.
Yeah, it was kind of like the Reader's Digest version of The Little Prince.
That's
inside
exactly right.
the movie, right?
Yeah,
because I didn't read the book,
which you should.
So I came in with the proper perspective.
No,
actually, as a child. Quick aside: my parents actually had a system where if the movie was based on a book, I had to read the book before I watched the movie.
Why did you not do this before this podcast?
As a 9-year-old, I
Your parents
read
are wise.
the entirety of Gone with the Wind.
You did not. Oh, and he's read Ben-Hur too.
Totally
so he's
regretted it.
Vodcast.
All right. So, I did not read the book. Sorry, Mom and Dad. I didn't read the book. And I actually liked what they did with the movie.
Right. And
taking this story, taking a condensed version of the story and uploading it into this extra story, I thought gave it a special relevance to our modern times. And in fact, it even got some conviction into my own heart because of the way it showed us the power of story within another story itself.
Yeah.
And then that story convicted me. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So meta.
So meta. Yeah. And that's the thing about this movie and the book. It deals with enough with the book, but the movie itself is really a story within a story. The Little Prince is sort of folded within another story about a little girl.
Style.
It sort of is. It actually sort of is. And so you're really dealing with the story of this little girl who lives beside this old aviator who has written The Little Prince. And she is a very focused little girl. She studies very hard. She has a plan in mind. She has her whole life pretty much plotted out. Or her mom.
Her mom does, for sure.
Has her whole life plotted out until she's 25, pretty much. And so the girl is working very, very hard. And the aviator sort of comes into her life with this story. And the story itself sort of turns the little girl's life upside down.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I loved about it. Because even though I didn't have as much Little Prince as I wanted, it really effectively talked about how impactful The Little Prince was for this little girl.
Yeah.
It changed her perspective on life. It changed her life in a lot of ways. And that I think is really the thing that resonated with me the most. I'm a big story guy. I love stories, and I think that they're among the most important things in our society today.
Yeah.
And this really showed how stories can impact us for good or for ill. And in some ways in this movie, we saw a little bit of both.
We see both, and I think there's a double-sided point here that I think we could see this movie and we can look at the negative content that is in the review. Be sure to check out the review, pluggedin.com, where you talk about some of the negative behaviors that are drawn out of this girl when she is engaging with this story.
Yeah.
And because it's told in such a tight window within a little movie, I think it's really easy to think, oh, look at that. Stories have this hypodermic needle effect that cause us to do terrible things.
Right.
Instead of realizing that this takes place over time and she is questioning and the story causes her in good ways to begin to question certain things around her in society that are negative.
Right.
And make decisions that are a little bit short-sighted. So there are some negative decisions, but ultimately it's drawing something deeper, something valuable and important, that if we can concentrate on saying, hey, these negative little decisions, they're not going to be good in the long term. So let's talk about how we can realize this bigger change in healthy ways. I think that's a great conversation.
Well, and I really love how both the book and the movie sort of encourage us to refocus ourselves, to focus in on the things that are really important. It talks a lot about it, matters of consequence. And it talks about how sometimes we, particularly as adults, particularly in a very, very busy, chaotic society, we lose sight of what real matters of consequence are.
Right.
We get tied into our work, our school, and all that's really important.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong, but sometimes we get wrapped up in these artificial rungs of achievement.
Right.
And we lose sight that the really important things are right in front of us, like this podcast that you're watching right now.
Yeah, the difference between working to live and living to work, in a sense, using that cliche.
Right.
Of the reason anything else matters is because of the people around us and their eternal significance.
You bet.
And so that investment really has that long. We got to have that long-term outlook.
Right.
Of we're putting in an investment right now for a huge, payout at the end if we do it wisely.
One thing I'll just mention before we go on is that The Little Prince has often been used as sort of a quasi-Christian metaphor at times. It has some very resonant moments that appeal to people of faith, I think, and especially in the book, but even a little bit in the movie, where it talks a lot about the preciousness of even wasted time, which always reminds me of sort of that verse about the foolishness of God and the wisdom of man. So I think that there's some value to be found in this little story.
So speaking of value in little stories, we wanted to close out by talking about some stories, and we want to hear from you, but some stories that have had a big impact in your own life. And I think for you, Paul,
see, I came
case in
prepared.
point
I've
right here,
brought
right?
mine. The Little Prince is one that I read every year. I think I might have already said that. But I do read it a lot because it's sort of a grounding type of thing. And there are some other books that really influence me, some movies that make me think in a different way. But I think actually The Little Prince is right at the top of the list for me.
Yeah.
What about you?
I think like you, if I had to sit down and think, I can think of some really classic examples, like the Chronicles of Narnia is one that always comes to mind. So much depth and richness in those. Yeah. But a recent example for me is actually Inside Out. From the moment I saw the first trailer, which was our first podcast. Woo!
That's right. Go watch it now.
1 year ago today. Happy anniversary to us.
We've gotten so much better.
And so, but from the very first moment I saw the trailer that showed like the emotions inside Mom and Dad's head for that movie, like it really got me thinking about the way I interact with my kids in ways that I've gotten advice from my own parents, great advice from other parents about like how we talk to our kids. I've read things about their psychology and how they are able to process things at certain ages and how we shepherd them and all. Like I have seen all of that information, time and time again, like in my life. But whenever I'm in these moments with my kids where I'm frustrated, where I'm dealing with emotions and trying to figure out my own emotions and their emotions, Inside Out is what pops into my head now.
Yeah.
And
I think you should use
like
that
the ending of that movie. Like I've caught myself being like accidentally telling my kids like, "Hey, be strong for me," instead of like really helping them. And that pops in my head, and I immediately like, "Oh, I remember how that turned out. Yeah, let's rewind this and okay, tell me about how you're feeling. Let's talk about it." And I'm like, it's an animated kids movie, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, what stories, movies, TV shows, books have been impactful for you? Of course, the Bible. Mark chapter 4 tells us the power of parable in all of our lives.
Yeah.
So
yeah, the Bible is sort of cheating in this circumstance. So besides the Bible,
yeah.
what other stories have influenced you?
All right, that's it for our little conversation about The Little Prince. Be sure again to check out Paul's review at pluggedin.com and like, comment, and subscribe to us here on YouTube so we can keep bringing you these vodcasts.
Yepers.
That's it for me this time. I'm Jake.
I'm Paul.
We'll catch you guys on the flip side.
See ya.